What if the man who vanished from your life 7 years ago, without a single word, suddenly walked into your hotel room and stared in shock at your daughter who looked exactly like him? A millionaire CEO, a mistaken key, a forgotten love. But what he saw that night would shatter everything he thought he knew. Stay with this story, because the truth waiting at the end is not what you think. The sun over the Amalfi Coast spilled molten gold onto the turquoise waves as a private helicopter descended gracefully onto the helipad of Villa Blu, a resort so secluded and pristine it looked like it had been plucked from the pages of a forgotten fairy tale. Gusts of sea air danced around the edges of the helipad, whipping salt and wind through the air, tossing up flecks of white sand as if nature herself was welcoming someone important. Leo Carver stepped out of the sleek black cabin, the wind brushing through his tailored suit, but failing to move the hardened expression on his face. He was a man sculpted by power, every gesture precise, every decision sharpened by years at the top of corporate empires. He was no stranger to private jets or urgent business retreats that masqueraded as luxury escapes. What most called paradise, Leo only ever saw as territory, an extension of control, of negotiations waiting to unfold, of numbers and risks carefully managed. A resort manager in a white linen shirt approached, offering a polite bow. "Mr. Carver, welcome to Villa Blu. Your private villa and conference suite have been prepared exactly as requested." Leo gave a curt nod and did not break stride. His assistant, always 3 steps behind, scrolled rapidly through his tablet. "The Tokyo deal is still holding, and the board is ready for a virtual vote this evening. Should I delay the CEO summit until tomorrow?" "No," Leo said simply. "Let them wait, but confirm the investor brunch. I want them all here when the ink dries." His eyes drifted across the stunning landscape, rows of cascading villas nestled into the cliffs, framed by lush citrus groves and the infinite sky. Tourists would call this heaven. Lovers would immortalize it in photographs. But for Leo Carver, it was just another strategic retreat, one more place to close a deal. He walked toward the villas without looking back, the click of his polished shoes against stone muted by the soft sea breeze. He barely noticed the families laughing over cocktails on shaded terraces, or the honeymooners tangled together in lounge chairs by the pool. None of it mattered. He reached his villa, or at least he thought it was his. Room numbers were faintly carved into the whitewashed wood, elegant but vague. A small card key slipped easily into the lock, and with a soft mechanical click, the door swung open. Leo stepped into the cool, softly lit interior, loosening his tie. The air inside carried a subtle, familiar scent. Something sweet and warm, like vanilla drifted through sunlight. He paused. Something felt off. Then he saw her. A woman stood in the center of the room, back turned, adjusting the sheet on a low, twin-sized bed tucked in the corner. She wore a simple dress, soft beige silk that clung delicately to her form. Her hair fell down her back in loose waves, chestnut brown and gleaming under the ambient light. And beside her, climbing onto the bed with the kind of joy only children possessed, was a little girl, no older than 6, maybe 7. Her laughter rang out like bells, full and unrestrained. Leo's world stopped, because that child, her delicate chin, the curve of her cheek, those eyes, those impossibly familiar eyes, they were his. For the first time in years, Leo felt air leave his lungs in one slow, stunned breath. He didn't remember opening his mouth, but he must have made a sound because the woman spun around. Her eyes locked onto his, widening in recognition, in disbelief, and something much sharper. Elena. The name fell from his lips like it had never left him, like it had been waiting beneath every boardroom conquest, every sleepless night. She was frozen, completely still, but her hand shot out instinctively, shielding the little girl. Her daughter. Their daughter, the silence between them felt deafening, like the entire villa had inhaled and didn't know whether to breathe again. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked. Her voice wasn't cold, it wasn't even angry. It was something worse. It was hollow. Leo stepped forward slowly, words tumbling in his head without coherence. There must have been a mistake. I thought this was my villa." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, it's not." He looked at her. Really looked. 7 years hadn't dulled her. If anything, they deepened her presence. Her eyes still burned, even under their tiredness. Her shoulders, once soft with youth, were now shaped by the weight of solitude. And yet she stood tall, fiercely, protective. Leo's gaze shifted to the girl, now half hidden behind her mother's legs, clutching a small stuffed dolphin in one hand. He could barely hear himself speak when he asked, "Is she?" Eleanor's breath hitched, just for a moment. Then she straightened, steel returning to her spine. "That's none of your business," she said. The words sliced through him like wind through ice. But what chilled him more was the look in her eyes, the way her pain had no edge anymore. It had settled deep inside her, like a wound she had long since stopped trying to explain. "I didn't know," Leo whispered. "I swear to you I didn't know." She didn't flinch. "And if you had?" He opened his mouth, closed it. Because what would he have done? 7 years ago he'd been handed a choice between love and ambition, and he had chosen to disappear. "I had to go," he said, more to himself than her. "I thought I had time. I thought you'd wait." Elena laughed softly, an unrecognizable sound. "Wait? For what? For you to call? For you to come back and explain why you vanished into thin air? I didn't mean to hurt you." "But you did," she said. "And not just me." The weight of that hit him harder than he expected. His knees felt weak. He reached for the door, but before leaving, he turned back, meeting her eyes one last time. "What's her name?" Elena hesitated. For a moment, something in her face flickered. Hesitation, longing, maybe grief. "Luna," she finally said. "Her name is Luna." Leo nodded slowly, as if that one word had knocked the ground out from under him. Then, without another word, he stepped outside. The door closed gently behind him. And for the first time in his life, Leo Carver had no plan, no deal to seal, no escape route, only the truth. And a little girl named Luna who might just carry the one thing he never knew he wanted, a second chance. The night settled quietly over the Amalfi coast, cloaking Villa Blue in an almost sacred silence. Soft waves lapped at the stilts of the overwater villas, moonlight dancing across the sea's obsidian surface. But inside two very different rooms, peace was nowhere to be found. One was filled with unanswered questions, the other with memories that refused to be forgotten. Leo Carver stood at the edge of his villa's infinity pool, untouched by the breeze. His phone rested on the side table, dark and silent, for once not pinging with urgent messages or market updates. His eyes, though sharp and clear, were lost in something deeper, something that reached far beyond the surface of the calm Mediterranean below him. He had always been a man who mastered outcomes, contracts, takeovers, negotiations, everything. In his world was built on precision and logic. But nothing about what had happened earlier could be contained in a spreadsheet. Nothing about seeing Elena after 7 years, with a child who might be his, could be quantified or reasoned through. Luna. The name echoed through him like a heartbeat he didn't know was his. He closed his eyes and leaned back, letting the memory flood him. 7 years ago, Elena Devereaux had been the most unpredictable, brilliant part of his life. They had met during a global conference in Singapore. She, a rising star in eco-architecture, and he, already a formidable name in high-stakes finance. Their worlds were different, but their chemistry had been undeniable. For months they met, between continents, squeezed love into time zones and late-night flights, building something fragile but beautiful. She had been fire, warm, illuminating, and devastating when you tried to contain her. He had tried to contain her anyway. She wanted roots, a future, a family. He wanted legacy, ambition, empire. And when his company faced a major threat, a hostile takeover that could have undone everything he built, he had chosen to vanish, believing silence would protect them both. But now he understood that his silence hadn't protected her at all. It had abandoned her. In the villa across from his, Elena couldn't sleep either. She lay on the bed beside Luna, brushing a soft curl from her daughter's forehead as the little girl breathed evenly in her dreams. In the quiet glow of the bedside lamp, Elena looked older than her 33 years. Not in a way that suggested age, but in the way that sorrow sometimes left permanent fingerprints on a person. She had worked so hard to build this new life. After Leo left, she had crumbled. Not immediately. No, not Elena. She had kept working, kept designing, kept pretending that maybe he'd come back with an apology, a reason. She hadn't even told him when she found out she was pregnant. For a while she convinced herself she would, that he deserved to know. But when every call went unanswered and every email bounced, she got the message loud and clear. Leo Carver was gone. Not just from her life, but from any life he could have shared with a child. So she did what she always did. She survived. She moved to Barcelona, started her own boutique firm, and poured everything into raising Luna. There had been hard nights, terrifying nights. The kind when Luna's fever wouldn't break, and Elena sat alone on the bathroom floor praying it wasn't something worse. But she had survived those nights too, not because she was fearless, but because she had no choice. Now, 7 years later, he was back. Not because he came looking, but because fate, if such a thing existed, had forced them into the same space again. And Luna. God, how had he looked at her? Elena could still see the confusion on his face, the devastation, that quiet unraveling in his eyes that not even he had seemed prepared for. And though she wanted to hate him, wanted to rage and curse and scream, part of her still remembered the man she had once loved, the man who had once held her hand and whispered dreams into her ear. She didn't know what to do with that memory now. The next morning, the sun rose over the cliffs like a wound healing in slow motion. Light poured into the villas and the resort, returned to its quiet rhythm. Breakfast trays, spa appointments, and tourists beginning another day in paradise. Leo dressed in silence. For the first time in his adult life, he skipped checking the markets, skipped the morning briefing his assistant had sent to his inbox. Instead, he sat alone at the villa's balcony table, untouched coffee in hand, watching the gentle flutter of bougainvillea vines sway in the breeze. He had questions, thousands of them. Why didn't she tell him? Was Luna truly his? Why now? But beneath those questions, something deeper pulsed. What would it mean to have a daughter? He wasn't ready for the answer, but he couldn't ignore it anymore. At mid-morning, he made his decision. He walked to her villa. Elena opened the door before he could knock. She had clearly seen him coming. She stepped outside, pulling the door gently shut behind her as if to shield Luna from any part of this conversation. Her eyes were guarded, her posture unyielding. "We should talk," Leo said. She crossed her arms. "About what?" "About her. About us. About what happened." Elena exhaled sharply as though she'd been bracing for a storm and was exhausted from holding up the walls. "There is no us, Leo," she said quietly. "There hasn't been for a long time." "I know," he admitted, "but that doesn't change what I saw. I can't pretend it didn't happen." "And what exactly do you think happened?" she asked, her voice low and almost trembling. "You walked into the wrong room. That's it." "Elena," he said gently now, "please don't insult both of us." She looked down for a moment, then back up, eyes sharp. "What do you want?" "I want to know the truth," he said. "I want to know if Luna is mine." The name hung in the air between them like something sacred. Elena didn't answer right. Away. She looked out toward the horizon, the sea stretching endlessly beyond. Then she said softly, "Do you want her to be?" He blinked. "What kind of question is that?" "A real one," she replied. "Because you left, Leo. You left without looking back. And if she is yours, then she deserves more than just curiosity. She deserves everything you never gave her." Leo stepped closer, the weight of her words crashing down. "If she's mine, I will never walk away again." She stared at him, tears just barely brimming. "You don't get to make promises after 7 years of silence." "I'm not making promises," he said. "I'm asking for a chance to be part of her life, to be part of yours again, if that's even possible. I know I don't deserve it, but I'll fight for it if you let me." Elena wiped at the corner of her eye quickly, as if angry at herself for being moved. "I don't know what she'll say," she whispered. "I've protected her from this world. From you. I understand." "No," she said. "You don't. Not yet, but maybe you will." She opened the door slowly, then stepped aside. Leo looked inside. Luna was sitting, cross-legged on the floor, a coloring book in her lap, humming to herself. She looked up as the door opened, curiosity lighting her face, and for the first time Leo saw something he had never expected in all his carefully constructed life. He saw the beginning of something he didn't control, something infinitely more powerful than anything money could buy. Hope. The day after Leo Carver first saw Luna's face, the child who bore his eyes, his smile, and maybe even his soul, something in him shifted irreversibly. The usual noise inside his head, the strategic thoughts and risk calculations that used to dominate his every moment, had grown strangely quiet. What filled the space instead was something more powerful, more disorienting, a need to understand. who he had missed, and who he could still become. Elena allowed him to visit the next morning, but only briefly. Luna was unaware of who he truly was. To her, he was just Mr. Leo, a kind man with eyes like hers who had appeared out of nowhere. Elena hadn't yet found the words or the courage to explain more, and Leo, to his surprise, didn't. Push. For the first time in his life, he allowed things to unfold without a timeline or an agenda. Luna was radiant in a way that made his chest ache. Her laughter was unfiltered, her mind curious and sharp. She asked 1,000 questions during breakfast, from do whales get tired to what's the difference between money and treasure. And when she spoke, Leo listened with the reverence of someone realizing they'd been deaf to the most beautiful sound in the world. He didn't try to impress her. Instead, he just stayed, helped pour juice, tied the laces on her sneakers when Elena was busy washing fruit in the kitchen. He watched her trace patterns in the condensation on the glass door and tell stories about dolphins she had only seen once. Elena from the kitchen watched him. Something about Leo was quieter now, still intense, still sharp, but there was a gravity to him that hadn't been there before. Not arrogance, not power, but vulnerability. The kind she had once hoped to see, back when they were younger and believing in a future that never came. After Luna left for a kids' art session this resort offered, Elena invited Leo to walk with her along the private side of the beach. The sand was warm underfoot. The water shimmered under a generous sun. But the distance between them, though smaller than the night before, still pulsed with unspoken weight. "You're good with her," Elena said after a long silence, her voice unreadable. "I'm terrified." "Of her," Leo admitted, kicking gently at a shell. "She's more than I could have imagined." Elena tilted her head. "Terrified?" He nodded. "Because every moment I spend with her makes me realize how much I've missed. And I don't know how to make up for that." "You can't," she said, her voice soft but certain. "You don't get those years back." He looked at her then, the way a man might look at a horizon he knows he can never reach. "I know, but I can show up now, if you let me." They walked in silence again, the waves whispering at their ankles. Finally, Elena spoke. "You don't know what it was like. The nights she had nightmares and woke up crying for someone she didn't know she missed. The first time she asked me if she had a dad like the other kids at school, I told her yes. And when she asked why he didn't live with us, I told her, some people leave, even if they don't want to." Leo's throat tightened. "I didn't want to." "But you did." "I thought it was the only way," he said. "I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" she asked. "A life together?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, because the truth was too ugly, too cowardly. He had run because he was afraid, not of her, but of being needed, of failing at something he couldn't control, of not knowing how to be both powerful and present. They stopped walking. She faced him. "So what now, Leo? You've seen her. You've held her hand. Do you want a DNA test so you can check a box and move on?" He shook his head immediately. "No, I don't care about the test." "Then what do you want?" "I want time. Time to know her. Time to earn your trust again. Not just as her father, but as someone who failed you, and someone who wants to try finally to make it right." Elena searched his face. "You used to speak like a man who always won. Now you speak like a man who knows how much he's lost." He smiled sadly. "That's because I do." They returned to the villa as the sun began its descent. Elena's phone buzzed. It was a message from the resort concierge. Apparently, a guest had posted a photo to social media showing Leo walking, hand in hand with a little girl beside the private villas. The post had gone mildly viral. A few finance bloggers had already picked it up. The caption read, "Billionaire Leo Carver spotted with secret daughter." Elena's stomach dropped. She turned to Leo, her eyes narrowing. "You told no one?" "Of course not," he said. "I didn't even know there was a picture." "Well, someone saw." An hour later, her worst fear came true. Paparazzi, just two for now, were spotted hovering near the resort's back entrance. Someone had leaked the guest registry. A security alert was issued quietly by the hotel staff. Leo paced the balcony, jaw clenched. "I'll take care of it." "No," Elena said, "we need to leave. She doesn't deserve this. Luna doesn't deserve to be tabloid gossip." "I agree," Leo replied. which is why I'm not letting this become her story. What does that mean? He turned to her. I'm going to tell the truth, on my terms, not theirs. She stared at him, disbelief warring with fear. You're going to tell the media that Luna's yours? I'm going to tell them I've met someone who might change everything about how I live my life, and that no matter who she is to me by biology, I won't be absent from her world. That'll destroy your privacy, your image. I don't care, Leo said quietly. For the first time, I care about something more. The next morning, before the press could swarm further, Leo issued a brief public statement through his legal team. It didn't confirm anything, but it also didn't deny. He simply said, there are people in my life I'm just now coming to know. Whatever role I might play in their future, I will do so with honesty, humility, and respect. The message stunned the press and silenced the worst of the headlines. There was no denial, no outrage, just a man who sounded for the first time deeply human. Back in the villa, Elena sat beside Luna, braiding her daughter's hair as the little girl talked about seashells and sandcastles. Leo watched from across the room, a quiet part of something that had once seemed impossible. And for the first time in 7 years, Elena didn't feel entirely alone. She wasn't ready to forgive him, but she was ready to see what came next. Because maybe, just maybe, some broken stories were worth finishing after all. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting long golden rays across the ocean-facing windows of the resort villa. Inside, silence hung like a weight. Elena sat at the edge of the bed in the master suite, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes locked on the floor. Across from her, Leo stood motionless, shoulders tense, breathing shallow. The news had broken just hours before. Not the full story, not Luna's name, but enough to stir the kind of storm that never stayed quiet for long. Elena had packed a suitcase for Luna in a rush, trembling the whole time. Her fingers shook as she folded tiny shirts, stuffed toys, and a beloved sketch pad into the bag. She wasn't running because she was afraid of Leo. She was running because the world outside, the one that had once chased her away, was back. And this time it was chasing her child. Leo watched her from the doorway but didn't try to stop her. You don't have to go, he said at last, voice low and tight. We can handle this. Elena looked up at him, eyes tired but fierce. You might be able to, but she's a child. She doesn't know what it means to be the center of someone else's story, especially when it's not hers to tell. She deserves privacy. I'll make sure she gets it. You can't control that, Leo, not now. He stepped forward. Maybe I can't, but I can stand in front of it. I can take the fall. Let me help. For a long time she said nothing. Then, finally, she whispered, she asked me tonight why people were taking pictures of you. She said her friend at the art club saw you on her mom's phone. I didn't know how to answer her. Leo's heart ached. What did you say? That you were famous. That sometimes people follow famous people because they forget they're still human. There was a silence between them, deep and unyielding. Then Elena turned, walking into the adjacent room where Luna slept curled up with her favorite stuffed animal. The little girl had no idea the world had shifted. That strangers whispered about her existence, her father, her face. Elena stood at the door, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall. Whatever happens next, she murmured, I won't let it take her innocence. Leo stepped beside her. Neither will I. That night, while Luna slept peacefully, Elena and Leo sat outside on the balcony under a sky of quiet stars. No cameras, no press. Just the sound of wind brushing across the palms and the occasional hush of the waves. It felt like a pause in a life that had forgotten how to slow down. I was 24 when I found out I was pregnant, Elena said softly. Terrified. Alone. You were in every paper, every deal, every photo. And I was lying in a tiny apartment in San Diego trying to figure out how to bring a child into the world. Leo closed his eyes. I kept thinking maybe you'd call. Maybe I'd see your name flash across my screen. I checked your interviews online, watched from a distance. You were thriving, Leo, and I didn't want to be the reason you looked back. He swallowed hard. You would have never been that. Maybe, she whispered. But the girl I was back then didn't know that, and I couldn't afford the risk. He reached for her hand, hesitated, and then let it fall between them. She was born early, Elena continued, voice barely audible. Her lungs were weak. She stayed in the NICU for 10 days. I sat beside that incubator every night, prayed every kind of prayer, begged the universe to let her live. And the whole time, I wanted you there. I hated myself for it, but I did. Leo blinked against the moisture rising in his eyes. She's strong now, he said. Because of you. She's strong because she had no choice. They fell quiet again. Only the sound of wind and breath and memory lingered. Eventually, Leo spoke. I was on a different continent when I got the letter about my father dying. I didn't even make it to the funeral. I thought if I just kept building, I'd forget what I lost, what I never had. But when I saw her, Luna, something cracked in me. It wasn't just about what I'd missed. It was about everything I could still lose. Elena turned to him then. Her expression wasn't soft. It was raw, haunted, honest. You don't get to come back and be a hero. I don't want to be a hero, he said. I just want to be a man who doesn't keep making the same mistakes. She looked at him for a long time and then slowly nodded. The next morning, before the resort woke, Leo made a decision. He wouldn't run press statements through publicists. He wouldn't hide behind legal teams or polished phrases. Instead, he sat down at the edge of the bed, took a deep breath, and recorded a video on his phone. No suit, no staging, just him. My name is Leo Carver, he began. You might know me as a CEO. You might know numbers next to my name or companies I've built, but you don't know the man I've been. Not really, and maybe that's my fault. He paused, looking into the camera. Not as an executive, but as a man finally stripped of the performance. There's a little girl in my life now. Her name is Luna, and she's changed everything. I won't share her photo. I won't tell you where she is because she's a child, not a headline. But I want you to know this. I am stepping into a new chapter, and I will protect it with everything I have. He ended the video there. No apologies, no declarations, just truth. Then he handed the phone to Elena. You decide what happens to it. She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the delete icon. Then she lowered it. Maybe the world needs to hear someone say that love matters more than control. Later that week, Leo arranged for extra security around the villa. He cancelled 3 meetings with global investors. He skipped a call with the board of directors. When his assistant asked why, he responded with a smile. I'm learning how to be a father. They'll understand. And for the first time in his career, Leo Carver didn't fear the fallout, because what he was building now couldn't be measured in market shares or media headlines. It was something messier, more fragile, infinitely more valuable. It was family, and this time he wasn't walking away from it. The gentle breeze of early spring swept through the quiet gardens of Villa Aurora, carrying with it the scent of salt, citrus, and the beginnings of something neither Leo Carver nor Elena Devereaux had dared name. The villa had once felt like a mirage, a secluded retreat untouched by consequence, but now it pulsed with the weight of their choices, and in that stillness the final act of their tangled journey unfolded. Leo stood at the far edge of the terrace, watching the ocean churn in the distance. The past few days had forced him to confront more than just the realities of fatherhood. They had forced him to ask himself who he had become when success was stripped from his title, when control was no longer an option. And the answer had been both humbling and terrifying. Behind him, the soft patter of footsteps brought him back. Elena appeared in the open archway, a cup of tea in her hands, eyes tired but clear. You've barely slept, she said. He didn't turn. There's too much to think about. Then stop thinking and start feeling. That silenced him. She came closer, handing him the cup. He took it, fingers brushing hers. You sound like the artist you used to be. Elena gave a small, wistful smile. Maybe I am again. Maybe she was always there, just waiting for life to feel like art again. Leo glanced at her then, really looked, and he realized he didn't see the woman he left behind. He saw the woman who stayed strong, who stitched together a life from the pieces he abandoned, who raised a daughter without bitterness or blame. He saw the woman who had every reason to close the door on him and yet still stood here handing him peace. I was going to propose a custody plan, he said suddenly, voice heavy. She looked at him wary. You don't have to. I'm not trying to take her from you. I know I have no right, but I want to be part of her life, consistently. Not just a vacation dad, not just someone who visits. You're serious. More than I've ever been about anything. Elena walked past him, staring out toward the sea. You know, I used to dream of this moment. You coming back, owning your place in her life, in mine. But in those dreams, I never imagined the fear that saying yes to you would mean risking everything we've rebuilt. I get that, Leo replied. But if we don't risk anything, we stay exactly where we are. Separate, silent, waiting. He stepped beside her. I'm not the same man I was when I left. But I know that words won't prove that. Only time will. Later that afternoon, while Luna played in the sand with a local artist who taught her how to paint with seashells and driftwood, Leo met with a notary in the study. Papers were signed. Ownership of a property was transferred. A new trust fund in Luna's name was created, with Elena as sole co-signer. When he handed her the folder, Elena stared at it stunned. This is a deed, she said slowly. To a home. Not a villa, not a fortress, a house. In Santa Barbara near Luna's. School, with a garden and a studio. I thought, if you ever decide to come back to California, it could be yours. Yours and hers. Elena blinked. You bought us a house? I gave you a place to choose, Elena. Not a cage, not a bribe. Just a beginning if you want it. She opened the folder, flipping through the documents. Her throat tightened. It wasn't the money that moved her. It was the message. You have roots now. Wherever you go, you won't do it alone. That night, Luna fell asleep early, exhausted from a day. In the sun, Elena and Leo sat on the edge of the pool, legs dangling in the water. A soft instrumental tune played from the patio speakers, something slow, full of strings and memory. I loved you, Elena said suddenly. Back then, deeply. Leo turned to her. I know. I hated you too. I deserve that. She looked at him, a challenge rising in her voice. Do you love me now, Leo? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took her hand in his, held it firmly, then kissed the inside of her wrist. I'm learning how, he said, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing it right. She didn't pull away. 2 days later, Elena made a choice that surprised even herself. She cancelled her return flight, not permanently, but indefinitely, just enough to let the air shift, just enough to see what might happen if she let Leo stay, close without demanding perfection. They took Luna sailing for the first time. She laughed when the wind caught the sail and nearly pulled them off course. Leo learned how to pack school lunches. Elena painted again, first just for Luna, then for herself. They fought. They made up. They figured out how to share mornings, without awkwardness, and how to say goodnight without fear. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The press, hungry for updates, eventually moved on. Leo's quiet video, shared only once on his company's internal blog, was never made public. Elena had chosen not to post it. The world doesn't need to know everything, she said. Some things deserve to grow in silence. And so, they did. 6 months later, in the quiet town of Santa Barbara, a woman stood barefoot in a backyard garden, a paintbrush in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. A little girl ran past her, shouting something about bees and lemonade. A man stepped onto the porch, watching them, smiling. His name was Leo Carver. Once he built empires to outrun emptiness. Now, he was just a man in love, with a girl who called him daddy, and a woman who had taught him that some things were worth staying for, not for show, not for redemption, but for the simple sacred chance to begin again. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey. If this story touched your heart, inspired your soul, or reminded you of the beauty of second chances, please consider subscribing to Fortune's Wrath, where every week we bring you powerful tales of love, resilience, and hope. Subscribe now and become part of a community that believes in the power of storytelling to heal, to uplift, and to connect us all.